we're now going to implement these controls into our system. And the first thing is making sure our pivot points are set. Now I'm going to make sure so I can't see any geometry in my system. So I'm going to say, I'm going to make my polygons go away. And our first thing is to make this control's pivot point be right on the joint. So I say D and V, like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the control inside, like that. So the outer control, and then the inner control. Outer control, inner control. And this last one's going to be right here. Okay. So what's going to happen is these indie controls are going to manipulate these clusters on the inside. And that's what's really going to drive all these systems around. Now, it's not thrilling to have this system on the joints. Let me actually bring back my geometry, and I'm going to bring back my head geo. Hit Shift H, bring it back. As you can see, it is actually bringing up the manipulator inside the mouth. So if I rotate, it's still going to be rotating inside the mouth, which I'm not thrilled with that, but I really don't have much of a choice because we really do need the pivot nature of this. And I don't want these controls to be around the tongue because that's even worse. But they'll just have to select the control and bring back here and do this. Now I put this in front of the mouth because when I rotate and the pivot point's on here, it'll rotate like this in front, like this. If I put this control off to the side of the head, what's going to happen is when I rotate to the side, these controls are going to start interpenetrating with the character. So we don't want that. So now we got to connect these and parent these together and then connect them into our system. So I'm going to hide this guy, Control H. And so how this is going is these outer controls are going to be parented to each other. So this is the last in the system. So that's going to be parented to the second tongue one. Just middle mouse, drag it up into 2. And then 2 should be parented to 1. Now this is actually like a basic FK back system. If these were just FK joints, this would be exactly what we would be doing here. The difference here is that what's really driving the system are these little individual controls that are going to be manipulating those clusters. So these guys need to be parented to the FK controls to make them really work. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to illustrate that in a second. So this guy's child, the little indie one, is child to the FK control around the outside. So I'm just going to middle mouse drag him right on there. Okay. So I select to see how it selects on. Now this guy here should be parent to this guy. Or I mean, sorry, this guy should be, this little one should be child to this, the parent outside. So I could middle mouse drag it right under 2. It starts getting a little weird looking in the hierarchy on here. So a lot of times I like doing this just with the hotkeys. I just undid that. So I select my child and then shift select my parent and hit P. And I can do the same thing here. Child, shift select my parent, hit P. And this last one here is actually going to go under the last FK, the last control here. So child and parent here. So this is not your garden variety, control system. It's a little different, but you can see how these are all, the pivot points are all there. And if I rotate this, you can see how they move around like that, and like that. Okay, and you can do this type of thing as well. Okay, so it's almost ready. So the next thing we need to do is we need to actually connect the clusters. And for some reason, my cluster handles got unnamed. So this is going to be my center tongue 1 clust. I can't express on how important it is to make sure these are named because it's very easy to track them once they're named. If they're not, then you're going to be fighting around for everything. Okay. In a perfect world, I should be able to just middle mouse drag and parent this right under my indie control. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take cluster 1 to our indie control, like here. So it's indie tongue 1 to tongue 1. But if I do that in here, like that, you'll notice something weird happens. If I grab my my translate mode, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't move it around. If I undo that, this is what it does right now. If I click the cluster, see how it moves the tongue around? Okay, so that's kind of a problem. It's not a huge issue because we could use a parent constraint instead. Why a parent constraint works and not a parent, it's been a bug in Maya for a very long time. So I'm going to grab my driver, which is my indie control 1, and I'm going to hold down, I'm going to select this in the outliner. I'm going to hold down Command and select my cluster one, and I'm just going to do a parent constraint. Now they are in the same pivot point, and I think they're actually the same orientation, but I'm going to use the maintain offset because I'm going to do a normal parenting like that. Okay. So then I'm going to select my second Indy and my second cluster. I hold down Command when I did that too. I already have my mode set on it. I can just say parent constraint on it. Now, if you notice, if I grab my first one, it is working now like that. Okay. So we're going to grab our third cluster and our third, our third Indy control and our third cluster, and I can say constraint. And then finally our fourth and our fourth cluster. That's why I was so picky with them being named. So say constraint, parent constraint. So right now, this should be working. If I rotate this up, see how the tongue comes up like that? Like that. If I grab these, shift select them in order, then it kind of does this. Yeah, it's not perfect onto it. And there's other systems we can do. There's expressions and there's different types of connections we can do to it to change how these are affecting onto them. Maybe lessen how much the controls are moving up to move the tongue up and down. But at this point, this is a pretty introductory stretchy system that we're building here. So this is pretty good so far on it. The only thing it needs to do is that now it needs to move with my jaw, and it's not doing that. And you might say, wait, it did that earlier. It did because we connected our joint pad to this joint here. The problem is that once we did our spline, okay, that overrode that. So it's not doing that anymore. However, this new system here is doing that. So if I take this and parent it under my jaw control, I just shift selected my jaw and hit P. Watch now. See? So I should be able to bring back my head geometry, shift H. See? And I can also grab the Indy controls and do this type of stuff. Now the twisting's not working because we're going to do that in a second, but yeah, you can do pretty much everything you need to do on that. And it's all kind of connected together. Cool. So there's the control system for our tongue rig.